Hello, everyone, and welcome. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to another SEJ Marketing Think Tank site audit. Hopefully, everybody's awake, interested in learning a little bit about various elements of SEO, UI, and social media and content, and interested in looking at a couple new sites. We are going to review 3 sites today. 2 of which we have selected from all these sites that everybody submitted over the last couple days, weeks. And we're going to have one site audit that's going to be a total wild card. So people are going to submit during the webinar, and you can do that starting now and throughout the webinar in the question box that's actually in the bottom corner of your webinar screen. And start submitting sites that you'd like us to review, because we're going to select one and we're going to review it live with only like maybe 60 seconds preparation. My name is Brent Satoris, and I'm joined today by Kelsey Jones, who's going to cover user experience and also the visual elements of a site. Matt Southern, who's going to cover technical SEO, a little technical building of the site and stuff like that. And then Debbie Miller is going to be covering content and social media, which is of course my favorite because I'm also a content social media person. I'm going to have each of the panelists just kind of roll through and give a quick introduction of themselves, and then we'll jump into some housekeeping and get started. So Kelsey, if you want to start us off, please.
Hey guys, as Brent said, I'm Kelsey Jones. I'm the executive editor of Search Engine Journal, and I have about 12 to 13 years of experience designing websites and looking at the UX of how things work.
Debbie, if you want to jump in.
Sure. Hi, I'm Debbie Miller. I'm the social media manager for Search Engine Journal, and I also do a lot of work in the hospitality industry with content and social media.
Awesome. And Matt, jump in, please.
Hi, I'm Matt Southern. I'm the STJ Breaking News writer, and I also work as a full-time SEO analyst, and I do site audits day in and day out, and I'm looking forward to doing one in front of an audience today.
Awesome. So just giving a little bit of housekeeping elements, and I might glance down a little bit some of my notes, but throughout the webinar, if you have comments, questions, your own experiences, examples you want to give, pretty much anything that's acceptable in a public forum, you can use the question box in the webinar and you can ask at any time. We're also utilizing a lot of Twitter for this webinar. So the hashtag that we're using is SEJThinkTank. It's one word, and you can use that as well to ask any questions, make any comments, and participate. After each site is reviewed, we're going to allow 1 to 2 questions, maybe more depending on how quick the answers are, for the audience to ask about the site that we're reviewing. So after the first site, we'll have a couple questions, then we'll move on to the second site, have a couple questions, and so forth. At the end of all 3 reviews, we're going to open up a completely open Q&A. You can ask about the individual sites, you can ask questions about skill sets from the individuals on the panel, whatever you want to ask, again, that's appropriate. Throughout the webinar, we might reference various different tools, things that we're using to analyze, things that we recommend using to fix problems or to improve upon sites. We're going to do our best to make sure that all of those get linked in the chat. So as those are being referenced, you should see some URLs there. If for whatever reason we miss one, or if you have a question about other tools that might be a different solution to the problem, by all means ask, and we'll try to make sure we get those for you. The entire webinar is going to be recorded, and all of the questions, all of the resources are going to be recapped in a post with the recording. So, if you have to run away and use the restroom, or if you feel like you want to share this later, it'll all be available for you on Search Engine Journal. So I don't know how long that typically takes us, a couple days or so, but it will definitely come up shortly after, so you can watch for that as well. So without any ado, we're going to jump in, and I'll list off the first site and we'll get started with it. So the first site that we're going to talk about is the Allstate Foundation. The Allstate Foundation is located at allstatefoundation.org and is a nonprofit arm of the insurance company Allstate. Allstate came to us really kind of in a very, their request was more generalized. They really wanted any kind of advice or any kind of input that the panel could give them as they're currently going through an internal site review themselves. So jumping in, we'll start this round of review with Kelsey. Kelsey's had a chance, everybody on the panel has had a chance to look through the site ahead of time. And so Kelsey, can you share with us some of your advice and thoughts that you had?
Yeah, sure. And if you could bring it up on your screen, that'd be great, Brent. So on the home page, there is an automatic slider, which you see is the main part of the site on the top. And I say automatic because the slides automatically change as you're sitting there. So the first thing I really liked about the site with the slider and the rest of it was the images. I think Allstate Foundation did a really good job of choosing high quality images that aren't overly cheesy or seem like stock images. You can tell that they took them just for the site. So I think that that's really good. One thing that I would recommend them improve upon is maybe either removing the slider or having call to action buttons on the slider, because as it stands right now, there's just statements about what they focus on instead of, donate now or learn more here with call to action buttons. So that area might be better served with just a static image with call to action buttons on the side. Another thing I noticed, if you'll scroll down, Brent, you'll see that below those that row of 4 images, there's just blank white space. And so that's a little confusing to me as the user. I don't know if it's maybe a problem on my end. Maybe the site didn't finish loading. I don't know if there should be something else there. So that kind of causes confusion. And when it comes to user experience, you want it to be as easy as possible and make sure that the users don't have any questions about the site or what they're supposed to do. And then another thing I noticed was, again, with call to actions at the top and in the navigation, there's not really, once I get here, it tells me choices in the navigation of certain projects Allstate Foundation has, but it doesn't really tell me, okay, well, here's what you can learn about, or here's what you can do to help. And so I think making it more action oriented would really help make this site more clear.
Awesome. So Matt, we'll have Matt jump in now and talk a little bit about the technical and side of it and the SEO side.
Thank you. So one of the first things I noticed from a technical aspect, because it's one of the first things I always check for due to how important it is that this site is lacking both a robots.txt file and an XML sitemap. And that's an issue because really they are pretty fundamental elements of SEO. Because what a robots.txt file does is it kind of tells Googlebot what pages you want it to crawl and not crawl. And an XML sitemap lets Googlebot know where to go to find those pages. So if it lands on your site without either of those two things, it's kind of just navigating your site blindly, which is not ideal. Another thing that could be holding this site back is its speed. Running it through a tool called Google PageSpeed Insights, which is free for anyone to use, I found that it has a 1 out of 100 on mobile, as you can see there, and 42 on desktop. So what this tool also does is provide a set of recommendations on how you can improve the speed, and things like image compression and minimizing the amount of code you're using are some of the suggestions for how to improve the speed on this site. And as Kelsey was saying, I do appreciate how visually appealing the site is, but at the same time, it does need to have some more written content on the homepage, because right now there's just not that much for Google to read and kind of get an idea of what the site is all about. There's only so much it can learn from crawling the images and the bit of text that's on there right now. And a free piece of software that I use when conducting any site audit is called Screaming Frog. And we'll get some screenshots up there on the screen to show you what it looks like. So one of the things that I found when using this tool is that every page on the site has the same title tag. You can see that highlighted and pointed out there. Ideally, every page should have a unique page title, because without having a unique title on each page, I think they're missing out on the opportunity to rank for a wider variety of keywords, because right now it's just their company name on every page. And also using Screaming Frog, I found that there are 37 pages with missing H1 tags, which is a problem because Google crawls H1 tags to get an idea of what the page is about, so it knows what keyword to rank it for. And finally, using that same tool, I found that there were no alt tags on any images, which are important because it helps with Google image search, and it also alt tags are also used to assist people with visual disabilities, so they have a real practical use as well. So technically speaking, there are definitely some major things that need to be improved on, but altogether, it really shouldn't take that much work to overcome these issues.
Yeah, and I think it's also really important to mention that, just to give a secondary kind of, validation to this, that these are essentially some of the most important on-page factors when it comes to SEO. Having title tags, H1s, alt text, these are really, really important fundamentals. They're not something that really you can have, make a choice of, do I want these or not have these. You really need to get these fixed, as well as mobile speed. Mobile is, for years been harped on by all the search engines as being one of the most important elements. They just recently announced that they're going to start increasing the level that they rank people based on mobile speed and mobile capabilities. So this is something that absolutely should be looked at. And if you don't know how to compress or fix some of these things, you can normally either reach out to your developer, or reach out to your server, or follow up with us later, and we'll try to give you some resources. But this is definitely something that's not a hard fix and will really drastically help your site. Debbie, if you want to jump in and give us a little bit on the social side, that'd be great.
Sure. So there are a few things on the social side, both on site as well as on their social media presence itself. Starting with the site, so they have the social media icons in the top header, which is great. It's great that they have them above the fold rather than people having to scroll down and look for them. That said, they could utilize some of that blank space that's down below the bottom stream of photos to integrate some social feeds to the site. That seems prime real estate for that, since they don't really have anything there right now, and they could integrate, the Twitter feed or Facebook Playbox or various different things to help kind of elevate their social presence on site. And similarly, when you click onto some of the interior pages, they could also add social share buttons. So some of the pages specifically are very visual in nature, like this one. So this is the kind of thing that'd be great to have a pin it button for Pinterest, so if people want to share it on Pinterest. And similarly with Facebook and Twitter, having those share buttons. They do have the two buttons on the right-hand side there, the Twitter and Instagram buttons, but it's kind of confusing because those actually link to their own social media sites. However, the social media icons in the footer link to the general Allstate social media accounts, whereas the ones on the right side link to the Allstate Foundation accounts, which is two different brands. The foundation is focusing on safe driving and things like that, whereas Allstate is the actual insurance company. So two different brands that are kind of overlapping. And specifically with the Allstate YouTube page here, it lands directly on a blank tab on the YouTube page, so that could create a lot of confusion for people who land on it and don't know what it is. They might think they landed there by mistake since there's no content there, so they definitely want to make sure if they do want to continue linking to the general Allstate page that they link to the actual videos tab that's over there on the YouTube page as well. Another thing for their new foundation Twitter page that they do have, it looks like it hasn't been updated in a while. So I think they need to kind of define the larger strategy and figure out if they do want to have a separate presence, and if so, how do they want to take that to the next level. Another thing that we noticed was that on some of the other pages throughout the website, there are different initiatives that they're championing for, and one of them is domestic violence. And if you look at that one, it actually links to a whole other subset of social media pages for the Purple Purse Foundation, or Purple Purse Initiative for domestic violence, which is also great, but they need to make sure, it's kind of confusing for a user on the site to figure out what exactly they are promoting and how their social media ties together. So having a more integrative strategy to connect all the dots on their social media accounts and then leverage the website to promote all the various things that they're doing.
Yeah, the only thing I would also say is that, look, in social, there's a couple things that are like social media gold, and one of them is feel-good things, right? Anything that has to do with trying to help people, telling stories. People want to hear about people's plights, especially if there's a positive outcome to the story. So you have a really good visual site. You have a lot of these elements, but as Debbie mentioned, I mean, there's no buttons. There's nothing that's really getting it out. And with all of these sites, it looks like at some point somebody came up with a strategy maybe there was an audit that was done, maybe there was a strategy that was formed, but the implementation of that strategy is really just kind of weak. And so it seems like maybe the strategy needs to be scaled back, and really like a goal needs to be determined, and then have that strategy really accomplish that goal, because it just seems very thin across the board, and you'd be much better off with one strategy that's getting focus versus a bunch of strategies that's very thin. So that said, I want to open it up a little bit to some questions. So do we have any questions from the audience that we can answer?
Yeah, Ashley Davis wanted to know, Matt, what if I don't have a robots.txt file? And if so, how do I create one since I don't have one?
It really is different for every site depending on what content management system you're using. So I would recommend to Google it, because Google has pretty detailed documentation about how to create robots.txt files for whatever CMS you happen to be running. It's easy. I mean, it's not hard. So.
You can also check it through Webmaster Central. You can actually, if you have Webmaster Central set up, you can go in and check the robots text and see what it's crawling and what it's not crawling. The robots.txt is actually a very simple file. In most cases, it's going to have just a couple lines. You can, as Matt mentioned, you can find some great examples.
Okay. And then Drew Davis has a question. What would it look like to organize those separate social media accounts, Debbie? Could you be more specific?
I think they just need to decide if they want to continue pushing and leveraging the Allstate insurance brand, and because that's the main brand that everyone knows about. And if they want to keep using those, championing those social media channels, then do so. But I think they need to decide if they want to continue having a separate social media presence for the foundation, and if so, how are they going to update it? What kind of things are they going to feature? How can they personalize it a bit more? How can they integrate it into the site? Because right now it's very disjointed. So I think just figuring out a way to kind of make everything consistent across the board, both on the site, both in the way it's being promoted on social, and just kind of creating a cohesive way to kind of blend everything together in a way that makes sense for people landing on the page to know which social media they're going to when they click on a link.
Okay.
That makes sense.
And just so you guys know, we are doing questions after every site. So as we're going through, if you want to ask questions, we're organizing those. And then after each site, we'll be able to answer the question specific to that site or just questions you have as we go along. Another question we had was the image page, Debbie, that you talked about with the really great images that almost looked like infographics. Bethany Smith wanted to know, should they be adding a content version of these images as well? I guess I'll say that I do think that there should be content on the page because those are just images. And so I don't know if you should duplicate it exactly, maybe just give a couple points. That's what we do with infographic posts on SEJ. Debbie, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think having maybe an introduction, and that will help for SEO as well, and Matt can probably elaborate more on that side of it, but having more content on the site obviously will help with SEO, and then having the visual elements as well is something to supplement really nicely for social as well.
Yeah, having more written content is always good because that's what Google reads. I mean, they can only get so much from images, so.
So I do want to throw in a twist to that and say that they are getting really good at reading text out of images. They've been acquired, a company specifically around that. The only concern I have is that the problem with SEO in general is that it tends to get overdone. People don't use the common sense balance when going at this. So I would say it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish, because going in here and taking this, and when people take an infographic or they take these type of graphics and then you put all the text below it, it's a marketing thing. Nobody does that except for marketers. There's no benefit to, it's for me that's textbook. I'm trying to do marketing, and that's something you have to balance user experience with always. Is how important is your marketing versus your user experience, and balance that. So if you can do it in a way that's very clean. Like sometimes you're using like drop-down screens where you can have like a click drop-down and it shows more data and it has some of that information, so it's actually on the code, but it's not so visual to users. That's acceptable as long as you're using the same language. That might be a middle ground, but just be careful doing things purely for marketing when you do have a user and a brand to consider.
Yeah, definitely. So that's all the questions we have for right now. If we want to go to the next site.
Sure. The next site we're going to be talking about is going to be a site called Measure IT. Measure IT is an Irish company that sells backflow prevention valves for sewage and drainage, and the valves are called like TideFlex Duckbill. And you can see that TideFlex Duckbill. It's a little bit to say if you're not in that space. Apparently, it's one of the top valves in that space, so it's very, very popular. And they basically they came to us for 2 points. One, they wanted to determine if they were doing a good job informing people about what these TideFlex products were, and they also wanted to know if they could improve their process for actually getting lead generation on their site. So in this case, I want to have Matt go ahead and go first and jump in and give us what you found from your review of the site.
Yeah, sure. Again, with this site, I love how visually appealing it is. Like the images, the way the images and the typography goes together is just very striking, I find. But again, I recommend having some more written content to balance it out, because right now there's not a whole lot of text for Googlebot to crawl. So you can't really learn about what the site is about just from what's on the homepage right now. The rest of the content, though, it does do a good job at informing visitors about the products, I find. But at the same time, it could be strategized a bit better, especially if the focus is to capture leads from organic search. For example, people are probably not searching for terms like TideFlex diffuser systems. They're probably searching for things like drainage solutions. So I recommend optimizing content around the types of benefits and solutions people are looking for, rather than product names and features and benefits and that sort of thing. Since the goal of this site is to generate leads, I also recommend having a lead capture form on all pages, and I don't just mean that contact us button that's right there on the top left or top right. I mean like an actual form that's embedded into each page that visitors can fill out, that's encouraging them to either contact you or to request an estimate, or whatever your KPIs are. And focusing again on the technical aspects of this site, I ran it through Screaming Frog again, which is my go-to tool for any site audit, and it helped me find actually 11 instances of duplicate content. And you'll see there on the screen. I found this by looking for duplicate title tags, and that isn't always an indicator of true duplicate content, but in some cases it is. And in this case, I manually checked each page just to make sure. And in fact, I did find that the 11 pairs of pages were exact duplicates of one another. So that's an issue that could be causing the site a lot of problems. So I recommend avoiding duplicate content, of course, when possible, and removing it whenever it's found. So get rid of one of each of those pages, I'd recommend. Another problem I ran into is that there are multiple H1s on all pages. And the reason for this is because looking at the source code, I found that the company logo was for some reason wrapped in an H1 tag. And that's just unnecessary, not to mention it's confusing for Google, because an H1 is an indicator as to what that particular page is about. So if Googlebot reads multiple H1s on a page, it might not know what keywords to rank it for. And lastly, one final thing I recommend for this site, if local search is a priority, is to have the name, address, and phone number on the contact page, preferably coded in schema markup, because right now the contact page only has the phone number and an email address. So adding more details about the location would help to rank better locally and also give customers a better idea of where they can find you.
Matt, one thing I noticed on your screen, and just to mention this, is their duplicate content seems to be more of a URL structure issue. So I don't know if it's WordPress or not, but they're not differentiating, they're not redirecting when the end of their URL has a backslash or not. And so that is actually a pretty easy fix, and we'll make a note. We'll get with Slobodan Manic, who's our CTO, and make sure that in the write-up we get a description of how to code that and how to fix that, or at least the verbiage of what you need to say to your developer or your server. But that's a quick fix that will solve that for the site as a whole.
Perfect. That'd be awesome if you could do that.
Awesome. Debbie, if you want to jump in and talk a little bit about social then.
Sure. So on the site itself, they do have there are all their social links down in the footer. So as I kind of mentioned with the last site, it's great to usually have them above the fold where people can easily find them, because down here some people might go directly to the nav for whatever they're looking for, and they may not necessarily scroll down to find the social links. So moving those up to the top as well would be useful. It's great that they have social media links for a variety of different platforms. They seem to be on every different social channel here. But with that said, it looks like they haven't been consistently updating all of the channels. They're kind of sporadic, and there's a lot of duplicate content. For example, their Google Plus icon links to their Google Plus page, which basically just shows their YouTube videos. So they don't necessarily need to link to Google Plus unless they're going to be posting regularly to Google Plus, for example. They can just have the link to their YouTube page, which will also contain their videos. And similarly with Facebook and Twitter, they're doing the exact same content at the exact same time on Facebook and Twitter, and it's all the same general info about themselves, linking back to their website. It's the exact same kind of stuff, and there's not a lot of variety, there's not a lot of engagement, so that those are certainly areas that they could look at to improve a little bit more as well. Another thing that might be useful, in addition to sharing industry news on social media, would be to incorporate some sort of blog on the website. Right now they just have the news button, which links to what they're trying to present as a blog, but it's a little bit disjointed. They haven't posted since Christmas. They just posted one line. So they could use that space to really talk about their products, talk about different things related to their industry. So that will help with SEO as well. Having more original content is not touched upon, and it'll give them content to regularly post on social as well that isn't just talking about their products. As far as the products themselves, I'm not super familiar with the industry, but perhaps it might be useful to have pages that also kind of define, in addition to having these pages that talk about specific products and types of, TideFlex and the different things, maybe having different, more experiential text. So stuff like, if you're in this industry, this might be the right product for you. If you're having this situation, this might be the best product for you, and kind of letting people who might not know exactly what they're looking for, they know they're looking for one of these products but not sure which one, giving them more defined ways to figure out what product they're looking for if they're not necessarily familiar.
One thing to comment on with the blog is we've actually, I thought I was certain that Debbie was going to forget about the blog again, because it is kind of hidden and it is kind of hard to notice. And with this content, people always say to every company, you have to have a blog. You need to blog, you need to write, and there's always these debates on like, how often do I need to write, and what if I don't have something to say? In a lot of cases, especially right now, it's important to make sure that when you're blogging, you actually have something to say and you're putting up something that's quality. You could actually end up hurting yourself by having this thin type of content versus, really taking the time to do one article. Even if you do one article a month, do something that's really good and have it be really purposeful and high quality. But I would definitely, look at that as an area of improvement.
Agreed. So I guess I'll give my input now. I really liked that the design was very modern, and that's something that a lot of B2B companies I feel like don't have on tap yet. A lot of B2B companies have really outdated websites, so I feel like Measure IT has done a really good job of having, like Matt said, good images and typography that will give it a modern look, which I think users appreciate, even subconsciously, even if they don't notice that they like the design. Just their experience in web browsing kind of gives them a preference either way. So I think Debbie had kind of touched on this, but one of the biggest things with this site that the company asked us about was lead generation and whether or not they're giving enough information on their main products. And I think both with the navigation and then also the content pages themselves, you should use a problem solution approach instead of outlining all of the different products you have. So maybe breaking down the top content pages in the nav as the top problems someone might have, and then providing solution pages with the options of the different products you carry. Because even though I'm not in this industry, if I was and I came to this site and I had no idea what product I needed, I wouldn't know where to start. I would think, oh, well, should I just look through all these pages and find something that I think I need? I think a much better approach would be focusing the content on, oh, here's why people use this product. Is this you? You know, making it more relatable to the user so they can identify with what other people have used the product for, so they can figure out why they need the product. Another thing I noticed is there's not an address really listed anywhere on the site. The homepage does have that map, but the map's a little confusing. I don't know if those dots mean are those offices or where I can get installation. I know it says in the header that's where we've had installations, and this too might be because we're not in the industry, but I think it needs to be a little bit more clear where the company is actually located, both on the contact page and then either in the footer or on this home page, putting their NAP name, address, and phone in schema tags, and that's going to help a lot with local SEO.
Awesome, good, great information. So I think we're gonna jump to a couple user questions now. Do we have any questions in the system right now?
Yep, we sure do. Here's a really good one. Becky Morris says, Debbie mentioned having a blog. Is it better to have your blog on a site or at a different URL? I think everyone will agree with me, definitely your site, because blogs are going to get that SEO traffic, and that you want that traffic to be going to your site, not to an outside domain.
Is that question based on limitations? I mean, some people have limitations. I think, you know, always on the domain, if you can, if you, for whatever reason, you can't, like another middle ground is like a subdomain, sometimes it's better than going and making a whole domain altogether. Certain people, like, you know, for instance, Allstate, they might want to have a different domain for the entire project. So there are exceptions to the rule, but I would say 99% of the time, same site, you know, as a subfolder.
Yeah, and a subdomain is just something like blog.measurit.com. That'd be a subdomain. Let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, Syed wants to know, how do I increase interpage visitor relevancy according to design? Let's say I have a coupon-based website and I have a product-based website. How do I help those work together to drive traffic to inner pages?
That's
Matt,
an interesting question.
Yeah.
You can always interconnect sites by simply, you know, internal linking, proper internal linking. You know, to use like I have a coupon and I have another site. It's hard when you're using non-real examples, because you have to look a little deeper at what's the connection between the two sites and what's the real benefit. You definitely don't want to just force things. You want to find a true benefit between the two, right? And so there's a lot of ways to drive people into internal pages. You know, even like for like a site like Measure IT, where you have a site, you know, where you're trying to get internal links or internal traffic within your own content, simply referencing through articles on here different products, right? Going in and doing an article that solves the problem, like you know, Kelsey was saying, like, what's the problem you're having, right? So going through and solving that problem and linking out the product pages internally would allow you to drive it. And even if you were doing that from a secondary site, you could still drive people back through reference points.
Yeah, it also helps every once in a while to use a bit of keyword-based anchor text. You know, don't go overboard with that, because you know, that could cause a penalty down the road. But every once in a while, just optimize one of those internal links for, you know, the keyword you're trying to rank either page for.
Good. Okay. Hopefully that's helpful. I also want to remind you guys, our next webinar is March 18th, and we'll have Slobodan Manic, our CTO. He's going to be discussing analytics, specifically Google, and Brent again will be presenter and host, so that's going to be great. And also, while you're asking questions in the question box, don't forget to use the hashtag SEJ Think Tank to ask more questions, and we can help answer those during and after the presentation as well. So the next question I had was from Maria Jackson. She wanted to know, Debbie, should all B2B companies have social media accounts?
Should all B2B companies? I think figure out where your audience is or where your ideal customer is. So I think for B2B companies, LinkedIn is a great place to have a pretty active presence. And there are a variety of ways to take advantage of LinkedIn by joining relevant groups, by utilizing their blogging functionality and those kinds of things, and then posting regularly on LinkedIn to show your expertise in your niche and your industry and try to attract people that way. It's very useful.
Yeah, I
also
agree.
LinkedIn advertising.
Yeah, I think what's most important is you should be on the networks that you're going to be active on. So don't join Twitter just because everyone has Twitter and then don't update. I think that reflects worse on your company than not having one at all in a lot of cases. So I would say focus on ones where your audience is and then make sure that you're updating those if you do have accounts.
But the short answer is yes. In some way, shape, or form, you should always be involved in social. It's the modern and future, avenue for marketing. It's not really an option anymore.
Exactly. So Danielle, our lovely webinar manager, sent me our wildcard site. Brent, I know you can't see this, so the URL is olympus-tours.com. So if everyone wants to follow along, olympus-tours.com. So this is a site that we are just going to do live. None of us have seen it. Someone that's attending the webinar today submitted it. And so if you just give us, maybe 60 seconds for me and Debbie and Matt to kind of look it over, then we're going to do just a live audit on the fly. And while you're waiting, if you want to ask any more questions, we'll be able to answer those after this as well.
And as Kelsey mentioned, we have another webinar that's coming up in, what was the date on that? March 18th. I just wanted to mention about that. It is about Google Analytics, and we have Slobodan Manic. I've known and worked with Slobodan for a long, long time, and analytics is one of those things that everybody's really interested in, but we all kind of slack a lot on. So I'm personally really excited about this webinar, and I would really highly advise anybody that's interested in analytics to sign up. There's a lot of really good information he's been sharing with me leading up to this webinar, and it's really looking to be very, very helpful and very interesting. So definitely I would, look into that. And if you don't know, we send out with our newsletters the initial registration first. So in general, if you haven't signed up for a newsletter, I would definitely do that so that you can get access to the presentations and sign-ups quicker. I'm not going to really let everybody have much more time, so I think we're going to go ahead and jump into this site, and we're going to let Matt go last because he's SEO guy, and it takes him a little longer to look at some of his tools. So we'll let Debbie start. This is travel and fun, social, and all that great stuff.
Sure.
So we'll let Debbie jump in and start with this one.
Sure. So one of the first things I noticed right when I got to the site is that they have their social media icons there at the top. And then actually, if you scroll down, they have them at the bottom as well. So that's great to have them in both places. So if someone lands on the page and wants to immediately go find them on Facebook, they can do so quickly. And then similarly, if they want to explore the site for a bit, they can do so and then scroll down to find the information that they're looking for, as well as the social media links at the bottom as well. It looks like they have pretty decent, obviously travel is a very visual experience, so they do a great job of utilizing visuals to convey the different destinations that they're promoting. They have a line at the top that basically conveys exactly what they do. They offer selected a variety of tours and excursions, so they do a great job of right around the middle of defining what they do and their role. And looking at their social media presence, it's great for them specifically that they're on Pinterest, because travel, again, is a very visual experience, and people tend to share their vacation photos on Pinterest. So it looks like they have a pretty decent amount of boards with some great photos of the different destinations that they promote. On the Twitter side, however, it looks like they're not quite as active. They haven't posted since November. And it looks like there's not much engagement, which is a lost opportunity, because I'm sure they have people that are taking advantage of their tours and traveling to their destinations through their company. And so retweeting those posts and sharing those firsthand experiences that people who are using their service are using and talking about online, that would be a great opportunity to take their social to the next level and create a more personal experience, as well as additional engagement. Similarly on Facebook, they're a little more active on Facebook. They have been posting lately, but again, there's a missed opportunity. I think a lot of great photos, a lot of different kinds of posts, fill in the blanks, different good use of hashtags and things like that, but I think they still could take it a little bit further and do more kind of firsthand personal experiences from their travelers that are using their service.
Awesome, Kelsey. If you want to jump in and talk a little bit about the actual, visit, how the site looks and the UI and all those kind of great things.
Yeah, so I really like the color scheme they use. I think the teal and the orange go together really well. I really like the visual. Again, like Debbie said, travel is such a visual thing, especially if you're doing a vacation. So I think having the focus on the images and the whole experience is really important. So I really like that about the site. And I also like that the search box is right up top to search a tour right away, because a lot of people, when they're searching in the hospitality and travel industry, they want prices and they want to know dates right away. That's mainly what they're looking for, especially right before they make their purchasing choice. So I do like that about the site. A few things that I think they could benefit from, and Debbie briefly touched on this, was focusing on the content that their customers are probably creating. So in this case, I can't find a blog on their site. Oh, there is a link in the footer, and it is updated fairly regularly. I see that the last update is March 3rd, which it was yesterday, so that's good. I think this blog could be really cool if you had content from your people that have been there. So maybe testimonials with customer photos that they actually took while they're on that specific tour, I think would be really cool. And a way to kind of get that content is you could look on Travel or TripAdvisor, sorry. It's the leading travel and hospitality review website in the world. And you could contact users that way and say, hey, I saw your really great photos you took of our tours. Would you mind if we turn that into a blog post? And that'd be an easy way to get content for the blog and also give potential customers a kind of a really close bird's eye view of what the tour is like. Another thing that I noticed going back to the home page is the slider, again, it's not clickable. So there are some good call to actions, like on the shuttle service slide, it says from $13. But if I wanted to click on that to learn more about it, I couldn't. So I would definitely recommend making the sliders clickable to go to those pages that you mentioned and making sure that those are updated regularly, because I see with this Panama slide, it says new, but we don't know, hopefully that was updated, but you want to make sure that it wasn't new, a year ago. So make sure that that's constantly being updated as well.
If I can jump in with a real quick comment, what I would say is, this happens when people put blogs up kind of as a secondary thought, but this blog, it really doesn't match the site at all. Like, the site has certain colors, a certain visual appeal, a certain look, and then when you get over to the blog, it's very plain, it's very simple, it doesn't have even the same company colors, and I think it's look, there's 5 years ago, we used to tell people, look, when you're doing your blog, try to be a little less commercial, try not to, be too strong. But I think that there's a much better middle ground now. I would really look at pulling some of the design back, the elements that you have from your site, and utilizing them better. These visual things like this would be a great landing for a blog front page with all the images, and people can click on them. The colors, the usage of the elements in the blog will help a lot to make it look more like a part of the actual site. Matt, are you ready to jump into some SEO? Awesome.
Okay, first of all, I have to compliment them on all the good things they have going for them, because, technically speaking, the site is actually very fundamentally sound. They seem to have all the fundamental elements in place. I actually had trouble finding something to point out that was wrong with it. But I did find something when I took it to the mobile site testing tool. because it didn't pass that test. It wasn't a total fail, so you might actually, like the site owner might actually think that their site is mobile optimized, but it only got a 66 out of 100 on the Google's mobile site testing tool. So that's not good, because unless you get a total pass starting in April, Google is not going to index non-mobile friendly sites in mobile search results. So that's something you're going to want to fix by then, because I know especially in the travel niche, getting mobile search traffic is very valuable. So you don't want to lose that. And you know what, like I said, with everything the site has going for it, that was really the only major issue I could find in the time that I had.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing to really think about with mobile is the image size that you're using. Like, really optimizing that image would be my number one thing to focus on, just because people don't have as much bandwidth, and they're oftentimes in areas where, in a doctor's office, where they have a really slow connection. And when your images are the thing that's taking 10 minutes for them to load, they're moving on. So really, when it comes to mobile, it's all about speed and making sure that you have things set up to load super fast.
Agreed.
Awesome. So just like the other sites, with this one, I don't know if we've had enough time for some questions to pop in, but if we do, we'll definitely address some questions for this site.
Yeah, we have a couple. So Ashley wants to know which is best, a folder or a subdomain for the blog on your domain?
Folder.
So subdomain would be your second bet then, if you had to.
Technically speaking, the search engines say there's no difference, but all tests and all experts pretty much feel that there is, to some extent, some difference. And just standard speaking, I prefer a folder. It fits better. It's more connected. In all intensive purposes, a folder is better than a subdomain, but not hugely different.
Okay. And if anyone has any more questions too about any of the sites, I'll look at those as we're going through as well. Lisa Evans had a question for Matt in his fancy sweater.
Thanks.
Matt is way fancier than the rest of us today. Matt, how do you feel about a dash in the domain? Does that make a difference at all?
No, that's fine actually, because Google kind of reads it as a space. So if it was actually between, if you had the option of doing like a long domain that was just one word, or a domain that was broken up in dashes, I would rather do the one that was with dashes, just because Google can read the individual words a bit better.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that that's a good idea, but it probably depends on how long your domain is. I mean, if it's more than 3 words, you want to be careful because, well, first with length, but then also it's going to be hard for people to remember that there's a dash. So if you could buy both and redirect, that'd probably be, in my opinion, ideal, right? I mean,
yeah, like as far as user experience goes, I know that a dash in a URL is always very awkward, but it definitely doesn't do any harm. So I believe that was
yeah,
I believe that was the main concern. So yeah, dash is very not harmful.
Agreed.
From an SEO perspective,
Yeah.
We always tell people it's the loud bar, conversation. Where do you work for? Olympus Tour. What? So in general, I mean, look, I don't know if you've tried to go after this one yet. It's it looks like it's a tour for Egypt and some other various areas. If you could get this, it's going to definitely help in a lot of ways. But if you can't, or if it's too expensive, then don't lose sleep over it.
Okay. Becky Morris wanted to know, Matt, what score is considered to be acceptable when it comes to site speed?
I recommend 75. I think that's even what Google does, because when it's color coded, the scores goes from red to yellow to green, and I believe 75 and higher, you're in the green. So, or maybe actually not, because this site has an 80 and it's not green. So, but I mean,
green is good. Green is good.
Yeah, green. Yeah, always aim for the green. But I mean, if your site like this one is 80 and it's not in the green, I wouldn't lose a lot of sleep over. It's much better than if it was in the 50s or 40s. Yeah, always aim for the green, and also look for whatever it says you should fix the ones that are indicated in red, there's always like, consider fixing and should fix. As long as the should fix ones are taken care of, I wouldn't really lose sleep over the rest, but ideally there should be no errors.
Okay, cool. I don't know, hopefully I don't mispronounce your name. Mayor Vias wanted to know what are 3 blog ideas for a B2B blog? So I know, again, I touched on that. So sometimes B2B industry companies have trouble both coming up with content and also having a good responsive site. But I think, some topic ideas that would fit for any B2B blog would be a focus on, telling your brand story again. So the history of it, the company culture, company, events, either that is an employee picnic or a new product launch. Those are always good fodder. Case studies with real customers always do really well, no matter the industry. Testimonial roundup posts about a specific product. Those are good ways to fill in the gaps. I have a client right now that's B2B, and they have a news site for their industry, and they try to do news posts at least 3 to 4 times a week, if not more. And that's really helped drive traffic to their site because it's made them a thought leader in their industry, because they have really relevant news posts that's unique content. So they'll find new studies or new development in the industry, and then their writers on staff will cover that. And so I think that is a really great way to drive traffic to your site and also get blog ideas as well. Let's see here. I think that is the majority of the questions we have today. Was there anything else any of you guys wanted to mention when it comes to Olympus Tours at all?
Okay. No, I think I'm good.
Yeah, the only thing I think we should, definitely mention is that if anybody has additional questions, or if any questions weren't answered, we'll continue to work on answering those questions. So you can continue to ask them all the way up into the end of the webinar. You can continue to use the hashtag SCJ Think Tank and continue to ask questions and comment and participate. We'll continue to follow that as long as possible and make sure that we get all the different answers to your questions into the blog recap. And then lastly, I just again want to remind everybody for our next webinar, we are doing Google Analytics tips for web publishers. That's March 18th, and it does feature our CTO, Slobodan Manic. So, and I'll be there as well, moderating, if that's an enticement at all.
So are you guys up for one more question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Ron Boyle got mad at me because I didn't ask the question yet, so I'm sorry, Ron. He wants to know, what are the best practices for ranking on the top of Google if the company wants to rank for different markets, such as different locations, or a location that is different from where their business is located?
In that instance, I would recommend having an individual page for each location you're trying to target. Because there are some businesses I've seen where they have multiple locations, but every location is listed in the same page. That's not doing you any favors. So I'd recommend, splitting off every location or every area you're trying to target into its own page, and optimizing each page for that specific location.
Yeah, the only advice I would give on that is that whenever you're trying to do that, you have to be so much above the board on quality, and you have to be so relevant. So, if you're gonna, when you're trying to do that, you really need to look at each individual page as its own, initiative. How are you going to build links? How are you going to do the right content? How are you going to get the exposure? What are you going to, how are you going to build that up to be worthy of that #1 spot for all of those different pages?
Yeah, and I'll say too, our last webinar with SCJ founder Lauren Baker, he covered this briefly and gave some really good examples. So Danielle, if you could in the chat box give the link, the YouTube link to that video, if you guys want to watch that. He has some really good ideas from huge sites like Airbnb and how they became content leaders for ranking in different cities and locations. I found that really useful. So that's another place that maybe, hopefully we can help give you some more insight as well.
Awesome.
So
So again, thanks to everybody who joined us today. Hope that you found some good information, and continue to ask questions, continue to participate as long as you'd like, and thanks for joining us.
thank you guys. And we'll
Thank you.
share Lauren's webinar on Twitter too. So, and Danielle just gave the link. So thank you guys.